All right. Welcome back, church, to this double dare on mission. So let's go on to the second dare that we want to talk about. I hope you had a good conversation around the invitation and challenge matrix, where your church corporately might pray that prayer that Christ sort of drop kick us together into mission and what that might look like. But we're going to go on to dare number two. Dare number two, which is this one. Would you dare to personally and intentionally let God change your missional prayer, posture, and practices this summer already? Would you dare to personally and intentionally let God change your missional prayer, posture, and practices this summer? Dare one is experienced corporately. We talked about the church and this culture of invitation and challenge, but clearly dare number two is experienced personally. By any measure of growth that we might want to see corporately, right? We want to see our church have more people in attendance, more people being discipled, more impact and mission, whatever measure you might have, we want to see corporately, then we need as leaders to take mission personally. The main mechanism that Jesus leaves us with for the church to grow is where people are discipled. They learn from ideas, but also practices of life and sort of heart orientation from other people. One of our primary tasks as leaders is to disciple, and to disciple other people into mission, we need to take mission personally. Dare one is corporate. Dare two is personal, coming out of the compassion of Christ for the crowds. So what do we mean by mission? Mission primarily is an expression of our life that's local and actually natural. What we're talking about here is not so much adding things to our lives, but sort of tweaking our natural rhythms. And for us to take this dare personal, we need to be prayerful and intentional. And so what I'm going to talk about, what I'm going to share now, is something, again, which could be broken up into a number of different videos and different times of teaching, but I want to give you an overview. But really it is about being prayerful and intentional in mission. If we love people, it isn't just going to be expressed, just haphazardly, like I hope our kids get fed, but you need to be intentional. You need times of when you have meals and when you pray together, etc. So the same is true about mission. We need to be prayerful, but we also need to be intentional. And so I'm going to be talking about this way of thinking about mission personally that has an intentionality to it. Intentionality of how we reach those we don't even know right now, that are strangers to us, and imagine these practices, these postures, our way of praying that moves them from utter strangers to possibly being followers of Jesus Christ. All right, so it's a way of thinking about intentionality through these four different movements. Someone moving from a stranger to an acquaintance, from acquaintance to a friend, from friend to family, and from family to followers. This journey, of course, is a long-term journey. Of course, we can't do all of these things very easily, very naturally in a summer. But I want you to see the overview of this intentional, prayerful way of living on mission personally. So let's talk about each one of these steps. Our neighborhoods are filled with strangers, people, they're just people that we just don't currently know. And so for someone to turn from a stranger to an acquaintance, it's mostly about a posture. I mean, whenever we engage in, let's say, one of these realities, hoping someone who's a stranger could become an acquaintance, we want to pray into that, right? And our prayer actually adds to our openness and availability to what God might want us to do. So this is mostly about posture of openness and availability, but also includes practices, our natural practices of everyday life, like taking regular walks. If we live more openly in our regular walks or frequenting stores, there's a greater chance of someone who's a total stranger that they could become an acquaintance, someone maybe we know by name. This is not a minor thing. Scripture repeatedly calls for us to show hospitality to the stranger. We think of Abraham and the three strangers in Genesis 18. We think of Jesus talking about the day of judgment, where he says, "You who are sheep are those who who welcomed me when I was a stranger." In Hebrews 13, it talks about meeting angels unaware through strangers. And so I want to encourage you to begin to prayerfully, intentionally have a posture of openness in your everyday life, to just be available, to just say hello, talk about the weather, maybe find out the name of their dog as you're going on a walk, etc. So there's a posture of openness we need to practice to grow in mission. But how do we move beyond that? How does an acquaintance, someone we know by name, potentially become a friend? A next step would involve a more personal interaction, such as the practices of blessing people, maybe giving them a gift or a word of encouragement, maybe having coffee or a meal or a party at your home or their home. Listening and asking good questions allow this relationship to grow. Now, this is, of course, requires intentionality, but it also requires prayer. If you think about all the people you're getting to know, and this maybe sounds kind of mercenary, but maybe keep a list of your neighbors and be praying for them. But then one of the things we can do intentionally is just having regular practices. One of the practices we've operated with here in our neighborhood, as we call it, Open Table Tuesdays. Both me and my wife are aware that Tuesdays are an open night that we keep in our week, that anyone could be invited for a meal. And when they say, well, why are you inviting me for a meal? You can say, hey, this is just our practice. We want to just have an open table and invite neighbors over. And so that's just an everyday practice, an intentional practice, prayerfully considered. Is someone who's an acquaintance maybe ready to be invited into this kind of a meal? It's a practice that we can engage in, intentionally, prayerfully, moving someone from an acquaintance to a friend. Now, the last two steps, of course, as I mentioned earlier, these are things that take time. We're talking about a journey of multiple years that could happen here. Could happen quickly, could happen, you meet someone on a walk and you lead them to Christ. That, someone can short circuit this whole journey. But we're talking about intentionality here. So I'm going to quickly cover these last two steps. And they involve something called a missional community. That is a group of fellow Christians, people on maybe a spiritual journey where you are more intentionally invested in, maybe meeting with them more regularly, having a meal together, maybe once every couple weeks or so. But this also takes intentionality. Maybe people that you've had over for dinner once, you can invite them deeper into relationship with people who are fellow Christians who are on this journey with you. That they can come and maybe as fellow Christians who are trying to bless a particular neighborhood, that's what a missional community is about. They could come in and do stuff with you, like maybe clean up the park, or maybe you're just having a group of Christian friends over and you just invite them to intersect that gospel community. That's an opportunity for someone to experience more of the gospel in community. And finally, the final step here is that as they encounter that missional community, that community of family, Christian family, then they might be interested in going deeper into what motivates you, the good news and the person of Jesus Christ. Now, all of this stuff together, in particular missional community, is something we're going to be exploring in more detail in the next year or so. In fact, we hope to offer an ongoing course where maybe some of you know particular leaders, maybe you are a particular leader who would love to be discipled as a leader on mission, making disciples, making a community of disciples. This is something we're hoping to offer in the next year. And so stay tuned for that. So this is the second dare. Would you dare to personally, intentionally let God change your missional prayer, posture, and practices this summer? And so this is what you're going to talk about. I talked about a lot, and this is like a long journey, like I said, but the first question is, what do you feel about this intentional and prayerful, and I would say personal dare to be on mission? And the second question is, what are you already doing? Maybe you're doing some of this already. It'd be awesome to share that in your group. And thirdly, what are you already planning to do from this list this summer? All right, so we're going to send you out into breakout room, and I'm going to give you a good amount of time to talk about this. And we'd love to hear some feedback from that conversation, this second of the double dare.